Picture a wooden box the size of a modern two-car garage. Now put 12 grown men inside it. Add their boots, their wet wool socks drying by the stove, their tobacco spit, their unwashed bodies after 16 hours in the saddle, and one window that doesn't open. That's a bunkhouse on a Texas cattle ranch in 1880. Outside, 400,000 acres of grass and sky. Inside, less personal space than a prison cell. A place where a man could ride alone all day under the biggest sky on earth, and then sleep close enough to his neighbour to hear his teeth grind. We're going back there tonight. Not as tourists admiring cowboys on postcards. We're living it. One season, one man. Everything he would have felt, smelled, feared, and survived for $30 a month. So, I make these history stories, and honestly, I still have no idea if anyone actually sleeps to them, or if you're all just strange, wonderful people who find comfort in hearing about saddle sores and frozen coffee. Either way, subscribe if you want, get comfortable. Here we go. The horse is going to throw you, and everyone knows it except you. That's the situation at 4:30 in the morning, your first full day on the Llano Estacado, the staked plains of the Texas Panhandle. 11 men are standing along the corral fence in the dark, and not one of them is standing there by accident. They finished their coffee early. They came out to watch, because the horse they gave you, the horse the foreman personally cut out of the remuda and assigned to you last night with a perfectly straight face, is a 5-year-old bay gelding named Preacher, and Preacher has put 4 men on the ground this year. You don't know that yet. You will know it in about 90 seconds. Right now, you know 3 things. You know your name is Eli Dawson. You're 19 years old, and you rode 400 miles from a played-out farm in Grayson County with a borrowed saddle and $11 to get this job. You know that the man who hired you, a foreman named Cass Rutledge, looked at your soft hands for exactly 2 seconds before saying, 30 a month and found, and if you can't sit a horse by Friday, you walk back the way you came. And you know that the bay gelding standing in front of you in the cold dark has one white eye rolled back toward you, watching your hands the way you'd watch a snake. The morning is cold in the way that only the high plains are cold. It's late March. The wind is coming out of the northwest with nothing to slow it down. No trees, no hills, nothing between you and Canada but barbed wire, and most of that hasn't been strung yet. The cold gets in through the buttonholes of your coat. It gets under your hat brim. Your fingers are already stiff, and you haven't done anything yet except hold a bridle. The bridle is the first problem. Preacher doesn't want it. He lifts his head, and a horse's head, when a horse decides to lift it, goes up 8 feet, easy, higher than you can reach on your toes, and he holds it there, that white eye rolling, his breath coming out in 2 long plumes of steam. Somewhere behind you, along the fence, a man laughs, just once, a short sound like a cough. You feel your face go hot in the cold air. That's the thing they don't tell you about this work. The physical danger you expected. The being watched. The being measured. Every minute by 11 men who have already decided you're a farm boy who'll quit by June. That's the part that presses on your chest like a hand. You get the bit in on the 3rd try, mostly because Preacher gets bored of the game. Your fingers are shaking and you tell yourself it's the cold. The saddle goes on next. 40 pounds of leather, wood and iron, and you have to swing it up over a horse's back at the level of your own shoulders while the horse steps sideways away from you. The saddle blanket has to lie flat first. A wrinkle under a saddle will rub a hole in a horse's back in a day, and a horse with a sore back is a horse that can't work. And out here a man who ruins a horse is worth less than the horse. You smooth the blanket twice, you swing the saddle. Preacher steps away. The saddle's momentum carries you half around and you stumble, and there's that laugh again, from a different spot on the fence this time. Second try, the saddle lands. You reach under his belly for the cinch, and this is the moment every horse like Preacher waits for, because your head is down near his front legs, and your attention is split, and he swells. He takes in a great lungful of air and holds it, puffing out his barrel so that when you pull the cinch tight, it isn't tight at all. It's tight around a balloon, and the second he exhales, the saddle will be loose enough to roll sideways with you in it. You don't know this trick, you cinch him up, you think you're done. An older man peels off the fence. He's short, bow-legged so badly that daylight shows between his knees when he stands straight, with a grey moustache stained yellow at the corners and a face like a leather glove somebody left out in the weather for 40 years. He walks over without hurrying, lifts his knee and drives it hard into Preacher's belly. The horse grunts, the held breath whooshes out, and the cinch drops slack. 2 full inches of slack, enough to have put you under his hooves before you'd gone 100 yards. Pull it now, the old man says. You pull it. The old man doesn't look at you. He looks at the horse. This one'll wait till you're relaxed, he says. 1/4 mile, maybe half. Let you think you won. Then he'll drop his head and break in 2. Keep his head up and your heels down, and don't you grab that horn where anybody can see you, or you'll be horn grabber till the day you die, and that's if you're lucky, because the other names are worse. He walks back to the fence. That's the whole conversation. You will learn later that his name is Amos Trueblood, that he has been working cattle since before the war, since before there was a Texas ranch north of the Red River worth the name, and that this is the most words he will speak to you for the next 2 weeks. You put your boot in the stirrup. Preacher stands like a statue, which is exactly what Amos said he'd do. You swing up. For 1/4 mile, nothing happens. The dark is going grey at the edges. The grass, last year's grass, dead and pale, hisses against the horse's legs. You can see the other men mounting up behind you, unhurried, and for one long, warm, stupid moment you think, I did it. He's fine. They were making it up. Then Preacher drops his head between his knees, and the world comes apart. There is no describing the first jump of a bucking horse to someone who hasn't sat one. The ground is not where it was. The sky is not where it was. Your spine compresses like a stack of coins slapped down on a table. The horn of the saddle, the horn you're not allowed to touch, punches toward your stomach and away again. The horse goes up, twists left, and comes down stiff-legged on all 4 feet at once, and the shock travels up through the saddle, through your hips, through your teeth. You taste blood. You've bitten your tongue. He goes up again. You hear yourself make a sound, a short, involuntary bark of air. Your hat is gone. Your left boot is halfway out of the stirrup, which is the most dangerous thing that can happen to you right now, because a man who comes off with a boot caught in the stirrup gets dragged, and men who get dragged across this ground don't get up looking like men anymore. Heels down, the old man's voice. You jam your heels down so hard your calves cramp. Head up. You haul on the reins, both hands, no shame left, and Preacher's head comes up 3 inches, and 3 inches is enough. A horse can't buck hard with his head up. The next jump is smaller. The one after that is barely a crow hop, insulting, half-hearted, and then he's just trotting, blowing hard, ears swiveled back toward you, and it's over. You're still on the horse. Your hands are shaking so badly the reins tremble. Your tongue is bleeding. Your hat is 30 yards back in the grass. and somewhere behind you, 11 men are watching, and nobody is laughing now, and nobody says a word either, because staying on a horse is not an achievement out here. It's the minimum. It's the price of being allowed to exist. Cass Rutledge rides past you at a walk. The foreman is a big man made entirely of straight lines, and he doesn't turn his head more than an inch. "Go get your hat," he says. "We got work." And that is how your first day begins. Let me tell you where you are, because you barely know yourself. You're on the J.A. pattern country of the Texas Panhandle in the spring of 1880, on a ranch that runs cattle across more ground than some eastern states. 400,000 acres, give or take, and nobody has measured it exactly because nobody can. The nearest town of any size is 2 days' ride. The nearest railroad is farther than that. The nearest doctor, and this is a number you'll want to remember because it's going to matter, is 90 miles away, which means that for every practical purpose there is no doctor. A man who breaks his leg out here gets it set by whoever is nearest with the strongest stomach. A man who gets gut shot or horned deep or thrown onto his head gets made comfortable, and that's a phrase you'll learn to hate. 10 years ago, almost none of this existed. That's the thing to understand about 1880. You're standing inside an industry younger than you are. The Great Plains ranches came boiling up out of nothing after the war, when men figured out that the longhorn cattle running wild in the South Texas brush, cattle worth $3 or $4 a head where they stood, were worth $30 or $40 a head at a Kansas railhead. All you had to do was walk them 1,000 miles. That arithmetic built everything you can see. It built the ranch, it built the bunkhouse, it built the whole strange, brutal, temporary world you've just signed into. And when I say temporary, I mean it. The open range you're riding this morning has maybe 8 years left to live. The barbed wire is already coming. The terrible winters are coming. But nobody standing in this grass in 1880 knows that, and you least of all. The headquarters sits in a shallow draw where a spring feeds a line of cottonwoods. The only trees you've seen in 4 days of riding. There's the main house, which belongs to the owner who is not here and is almost never here. He lives in a city, wears a watch chain, and thinks of all this as columns in a ledger. There's a cook shack, a blacksmith shed, corrals of cedar posts hauled in from a canyon 40 miles east, a dugout half buried in the hillside for storing what needs to stay cool. And there's the bunkhouse, 16 feet by 24. I want you to hold those numbers. 16 by 24, 1 door, 1 window, a stove in the middle, and 12 men. The bunks are built into the walls in 2 tiers, wooden frames strung with rawhide, mattresses stuffed with prairie hay that rustles every time a man turns over, so that all night long the room whispers. Each man's world is that bunk and the wall beside it, a nail for a hat, a peg for a gun belt, a wooden crate for everything else he owns, and everything else he owns fits in the crate with room left over, a spare shirt, a razor maybe, a letter or 2 gone soft at the folds from being read, a photograph if he's the kind of man who has anyone to be photographed. Privacy does not exist here. It isn't restricted. It isn't rationed. It does not exist as a category any more than ice water in July. You will dress in front of these men, sleep an arm's length from them, hear every sound their bodies make, and they will hear yours, and the only privacy anyone gets is the kind a man builds inside his own face. And you'll notice, in your first week, that the older hands all have it, that same expression, closed as a shut barn door. The smell of the bunkhouse is its own education. Wood smoke first, always, soaked into every board. Then leather and neat's foot oil, because saddles and boots get worked over by lamplight. Then wet wool, sweat old and new, kerosene from the lamp, tobacco in every form, smoked, chewed, and spat into a coffee can by the stove that somebody empties when he loses at cards. And under all of it, faint and constant, the smell of the men themselves, which after a while you stop smelling at all, which should tell you something about what you've started smelling like. Now the men. 12 of you, counting you, and you count last. Cass Rutledge, the foreman, has his own small room built onto the end of the cook shack, which makes him the only man on this ranch who sleeps behind a door. 40 years old, maybe. He was trailing herds to Abilene when Abilene still meant something. He speaks perhaps 200 words on an ordinary day, and each one lands like a fence post being set. Amos Trueblood you've met, the bow-legged old man who kneed your horse in the belly and saved your life without ever quite looking at you. He is the oldest hand on the place and the best roper, and he holds both of those facts the way he holds everything, silently. There's a pair of brothers from down on the Nueces, Refugio and Santos Vela, vaqueros whose family was working cattle on this land's grandmother when the men who now own it were still in Tennessee. Everything the American cowboy knows, the saddle he sits, the rope he throws, half the words in his mouth, lariat, remuda, chaps, cinch, rodeo. He learned from men like these, and pays them for the education by giving them the worst horses and the far side of every herd. Refugio can make a 60-foot throw look like a man tossing his hat onto a bed. Santos sings to the cattle at night in a voice that would break your heart if you let it. There's Dodge, who is called Dodge because of something that happened in Dodge City that he will not discuss. There's a black cowboy named Marsh Wheeler, who rode up the trail 3 times before you were old enough to plough, and who is, you'll figure this out within the month, the second best hand on the ranch after Amos, and who will make $30 a month until the day he dies, the same as you're making your first week, because that ceiling is nailed down hard and everybody knows it and nobody says it. One cowboy in 3 or 4 on these plains is black or Mexican. The picture books will forget that later. The Bunkhouse in 1880 has not forgotten it. The Bunkhouse just has its own quiet, iron rules about who does which work and who never gives an order to whom. There's a kid named Tally, 16, the horse wrangler, who looks after the remuda, the herd of 100-odd saddle horses that makes the whole operation move, and who is the only person on this ranch with less standing than you. There are 4 more men whose names you'll learn as they matter, and there is the cook. The cook's name is Bertram, and here is the first law of your new life. The cook outranks you. The cook outranks everyone but Cass, and on the subject of his own fire, his own wagon, and his own coffee, he outranks Cass too. A ranch can lose any single rider and limp along. A ranch that loses its cook or angers its cook is a ranch where 12 exhausted men eat burned beans in a poisonous silence, and work suffers and tempers fray, and eventually somebody gets hurt. Everyone understands this. So Bertram, 60, one-eyed, a stove-up former rider whose hip was ruined by a falling horse in 1868, rules his territory like a small volcanic god, and grown men who fear nothing on 4 legs say please to him and mean it. Breakfast this first morning, eaten standing in the dark before you ever walked to that corral, was beef, beans, and biscuits, with coffee that Bertram makes by a recipe someone will eventually write down as take 2 pounds of coffee, add water, boil for 30 minutes, then throw in a horseshoe, and if the horseshoe sinks, Add more coffee. You will eat beef, beans, and biscuits this morning, and tonight, and tomorrow, and 400 more times before the year is out. You're surrounded by 100,000 cattle, and you will almost never taste anything but the same 3 foods, because the cattle aren't yours, and every one of them is money, and the ranch would sooner feed you than waste a marketable steer. Though, when one breaks a leg or goes down in a bog past saving, Bertram will be there with a knife before the animal is done being alive, and for 2 days afterward the bunkhouse will smell like fried steak and feel almost like a holiday. $30 a month and found. Found means the food and the bunk. Your saddle is your own. A cowboy without his own saddle is not a cowboy. He's a beggar who can ride. And it costs more than a month's wages. And if you had to choose between the saddle and the horse, you'd keep the saddle. Because the horses belong to the ranch anyway. $30. A store clerk in Fort Worth makes more and sleeps in a bed by himself. You will work, in season, from 4 in the morning until 9 at night, 7 days a week. No Sundays, no holidays, in weather that would close down a city, doing work that maims men on a regular schedule. Divide it out, and you're earning about 8 cents an hour to risk your neck. And the strange truth, the truth you can feel already, 1 hour into your first day with your tongue still bleeding, is that men fight for these jobs. Men ride 400 miles for them, like you did, because for 30 a month you get a horse under you and the whole sky over you, and no man standing close enough to watch you sweat except the 11 who are sweating too. You get your hat. You get back on preacher, who has decided to be a saint for the rest of the morning, which is somehow more insulting than the bucking. The day's work is called riding line, and Cass gives it to you in 9 words. Ride with Amos, do what he does, say nothing. So you ride. Riding line means this. The ranch has no fences, so the fences are men. Riders go out in pairs and singles along the invisible edges of the range, turning back cattle that drift too far, watching for trouble, and trouble out here has 100 faces. Bogged cattle, screwworm, wolves, rustlers, prairie fire, a cow dead in a waterhole poisoning it for the rest. You and Amos ride northeast into the sunrise, and for 2 hours he does not speak. The land unrolls. I need you to understand what this country looks like, because it doesn't look like anything. That's the point of it. The Llano Estacado is one of the flattest large surfaces on the planet, a tableland so level and so featureless that the Spanish, 300 years before you, are said to have driven stakes into the ground to find their way back, because there was nothing else to steer by. No trees, no rocks, no hills, just grass to the edge of the world in every direction. And a sky so big it has weather happening in 3 different places at once, and a wind that has been blowing since before you were born and will not stop in your lifetime. Men go strange in this country. Not many, but some. The old hands have a word for it. They say a man's gone locoed, same word they use for a horse that ate the wrong weed, and the symptoms are a fellow who stops talking even at supper, who stares, who one morning saddles up and rides off the ranch without drawing his pay. The emptiness gets into some men like water into a boot. Into others it settles like a medicine. You don't know yet which kind of man you are. Nobody knows until the country tells them. Around mid-morning, Amos pulls up and looks at something you can't see. Then you can see it, a quarter-mile off, at the edge of a shallow playa lake, a dark shape heaving. Bogged cow. Here's the situation, and it's a situation that will kill more of your working hours this spring than any other single thing. The winter was dry. The cattle crowd the water that's left, and the edges of these shallow lakes are mud with the skin of firm ground over them, and 1,000-pound cow walks out, breaks through, and sinks to her belly. And then she is done. She cannot lift her own weight out of the suction. She will stand there, sinking an inch a day, bawling until she's too weak to bawl, and then she'll die over the course of about 3 days, of thirst, in water, and the coyotes will not always wait for her to finish, unless 2 men pull her out. This is what you are for. Up close the cow is wild-eyed and past exhaustion, sunk to her flanks, and the mud around her stinks. A black, sulphurous, dead thing stink that rolls over you at 30 feet and coats the back of your throat. Amos shakes out a loop, drops it over her horns like he's hanging a coat, and dallies the rope around his saddle horn. His horse leans into it, hooves cutting, and the cow bawls, and nothing moves. She's set, Amos says. You're going in. You look at the mud. You look at him. Boots off or on, you ask, and it's the first smart question you've asked since you got here, and something happens at the corner of his moustache that, in another man, might be the beginning of a smile. On. Mud'll take 'em off you either way, but it'll take your feet slower. Going in means this. You wade into the freezing black slop, and it is freezing, snowmelt cold, cold that closes around your thighs like a hand, and you work your arm down along the cow's buried foreleg, down into the suction, into mud that grips your arm the way wet concrete would, and you break the seal. You have to reach the hoof. The mud fights you for every inch. It packs under your fingernails, up your sleeve, against your armpit. The smell is inside your head now. The cow is thrashing 8 inches from your skull, and a cow's head with horns on it, swung in panic, will crack a man's face like a plate. You get the leg. You heave it forward out of its socket of mud, and the suction lets go with a sound like the earth smacking its lips. Then the other leg. Then you fall back, and Amos's horse takes the strain, and the cow comes out of the bog in a series of obscene sucking jerks, and the very moment, she is on firm ground, she turns and charges you. That's the thanks. Every time. A bogged cow pulled to safety comes out fighting the nearest thing on 2 legs, and you learn to be already moving, already halfway to your horse, and Amos sits above the whole scene like a man watching weather, and lets the cow chase you exactly as far as is educational before he hazes her off. You are mud to the shoulders. Your boots each weigh 9 pounds. The wind finds every wet inch of you and turns it to ice, and you will not be dry again until tonight, and you know it. How many of these in a spring, you ask? Amos coils his rope. Till the rains come, 2 a day, some days 6. 6 a day. You do that arithmetic without wanting to, and your body understands the answer before your head does, in the form of a low ache that starts in your shoulders and settles in for the season. You eat dinner. Dinner is the noon meal out here. Supper's at night. Nobody says lunch. From your saddlebag sitting your horse, cold biscuit, cold beef. Amos eats without dismounting because dismounting for food is for men with time, and he talks a little now over the food in the flat way he has, and the talk is all instruction wearing the disguise of gossip. He tells you the waterholes by name and which one goes bad in August. He tells you that if your horse pricks his ears at nothing, believe the horse. He tells you what screwworm smells like. You'll know it before you see it. A sweetness gone wrong, coming off a wound with something alive in it, and how you'll rope the animal and doctor the wound with a swab, and how a bad case looks, and you stop chewing when he describes it, and he watches you stop chewing and files that away. He tells you the rules of the bunkhouse, none of which are written, and every one of which is iron. You don't touch another man's bunk. You don't touch another man's rig. You don't read a man's letter over his shoulder or ask who's in the photograph. You don't ask a man what his name was before he came here. This country is full of men who arrived with new names, and the etiquette of not asking is what keeps 12 armed strangers civil in a 16 by 24 box. You keep your own troubles in your own crate. If you're sick, you work. If you can't work, you say so once without decoration, and men will cover your string without a word, and you will do the same for them without a word forever, because that wordless covering is the entire social contract, and it is stronger than most marriages. And he tells you about the man whose bunk you inherited. Boy name of Whitfield, Amos says, looking out at the grass. Horse fell on him at the Frio crossing, September 19. A pause, the length of a breath. You'd be sleeping under his window. 19, your age. You look at nothing, the way everyone here looks at nothing. What did they do with his gear? Sold it in the yard, sent the money to his mother in Bastrop with a letter Cass wrote. Amos gathers his reins. Letter took him 3 nights. I seen him tear up more paper than the ranch buys in a year. And then he rides, because the day is only half over, and there is another bog with another cow in it 2 miles on, and you follow him into the wind, wet to the shoulders, 19 years old, sleeping in a dead boy's bunk, and this is the job, and you ask for it. And here is the strangest thing, the thing you couldn't explain in a letter home if you tried. Some part of you, cold and aching and humiliated twice before noon, is glad to the bone. By the time you ride back into headquarters, the light is going copper, and your body has stopped being a body and become an inventory of specific complaints. The insides of your knees are rubbed raw through your trousers. New riders bleed there. Everyone knows it. Nobody mentions it. Your lower back has a hot wire through it. Your hands, and this will shock you when you pull your gloves off by the corral, have blistered, broken, and dried again in the space of 1 day, the rope having eaten the soft farm skin off your palms in neat diagonal stripes. In 3 weeks, these hands will be somebody else's hands, yellow calloused, seamed with black, thick-fingered, hands that can't do fine work anymore but can hold a rope with 1,000 pounds fighting the other end of it. Tonight they're just raw, and they sting when you unsaddle. And you unsaddle anyway, and you rub Preacher down and check his feet and turn him into the Remuda before you take 1 step toward food. Because the horse eats before you do, is cared for before you are, always without exception. A man who tends himself before his horse is finished on this ranch and every ranch, and the news of it would beat him to the next county. Supper is beef, beans, and biscuits. You eat like a machine stoking itself, and then the bunkhouse at night, your first real night of it, the stove ticking, the lamp making its small yellow room inside the dark room, Dodge and Marsh playing cards on a crate for matchsticks, because Cass allows no money games, somebody mending a bridle, somebody already snoring, Santos outside singing low to the horses, and the wind working at the corners of the roof like it's looking for a way in. You lie in a dead boy's bunk under a dead boy's window with every muscle in your body announcing itself, and you think you'll never sleep, and you are asleep before you finish the thought. The next 2 weeks teach you the shape of ordinary time, and ordinary time out here has its own strange arithmetic. There are no Sundays. Let me say that plainly, because everything you know about the rhythm of a week came from a world with church bells in it. Cattle do not observe the Sabbath. The bogs do not close for worship. 7 days the same, and the only calendar that matters is weather and season. And after 10 days you catch yourself unable to say what day of the week it is. And after 20 you stop trying, and something in you, the farm boy who measured his life in Sundays, quietly dies and is not much mourned. What the week has instead is the evening, every evening the same small liturgy. The horses grained and turned out, the wash basin by the door, 1 basin, 12 men, and a strict unspoken order of use that you learn by violating it once. Supper eaten fast and mostly silent. Men who talked all day would be suspicious. Men who worked all day are hungry. And then the 2 hours of lamplight, and the 2 hours of lamplight are the entire culture of the cattle range, its parliament, its theatre, its university. You learn the crafts first, because the crafts are survival wearing the mask of a hobby. Every man works leather at night. A saddle is a machine with 200 parts, and the nearest repair shop is 100 miles, so you repair endlessly. Restitching a stirrup fender with an awl, and waxed thread by lamplight. Your palms pushing the needle through leather thick as a boot sole, the awl handle leaving its own round bruise in the heel of your hand. You learn to plait a rawhide hobble. You learn to twist a grass rope when your manila one frays, and you learn why nobody willingly uses a grass rope. You learn to actually sew buttons and rips, because there is no woman within 2 days' ride and never will be, and a man whose shirt hangs in flags is a man nobody wants representing the outfit. 12 grown men doing needlework around a stove, armed, silent, entirely unembarrassed. Nobody back home would believe the picture. Then there's the talk, when there is talk, and range talk is its own dialect with its own laws. Understatement is the grammar. A man who was nearly killed today says he had a little trouble. A blizzard that freezes cattle standing up is sharp weather. The worst insult available is not an obscenity. Obscenity is just punctuation out here. The worst insult is he's all gurgle and no guts. Or worse, quietly, he don't savvy cow. And a compliment, the only real one, is the one Amos will eventually pay you. He'll do to ride the river with. That phrase comes off the trail crossings, where the river was where men drowned, and to ride the river with a man means you'd put your life next to his in the water. They hand these phrases around the stove like coins, worn smooth from use, and you begin, without noticing the moment it happens, to talk this way yourself. You catch it in your own mouth one evening, describing the bog cow that ran you down as a little on the ungrateful side, and getting, from Marsh, one short exhale through the nose, which is a standing ovation. And there are the lies. Formal, magnificent, competitive lies, told straight-faced in a genre everyone understands as a genre. Dodge holds the championship, he tells you, with dates, with witnesses, with the names of the horses. About the winter it got so cold on the Cimarron that the flame froze on the candle, and they had to bury it in the spring thaw so it wouldn't set the grass afire. He tells about a mosquito on the coast country that carried off a yearling calf, and 2 more that argued over whether to eat it there or take it home to their families. The rules are never smile, never admit, and never top another man's lie in the same evening, because that's greedy. It takes you a month to understand that this is not foolishness. 12 men in a box for a year will either learn to be entertaining or learn to hate each other, and the lies are the ranch's immune system, and the biggest liars are, without exception, the men you'd most want beside you when everything goes wrong. Mail comes when it comes, when anyone passes the road ranch on the Tascosa Trail, which means every 3 or 4 weeks a man rides in with a flour sack holding the outfit's entire connection to the living world. The distribution is a ceremony of tremendous casualness. Names are read out. Men take their letters and do not open them. That's the etiquette that catches you off guard. No one reads mail in company. A man takes his letter to his bunk, or waits for his night guard, or carries it in his shirt for a day like a coal, and reads it alone. And whatever the letter did to him has been ironed out of his face by the time you see it again. You get one letter in April from your mother, and it says the corn is in, and your sister has a beau, and your father's cough is no worse. And you read it 4 times on the picket line in the dark, and the paper smells. You'd swear it faintly under the horse and the wood smoke, like the inside of the house you grew up in, and you fold it along her folds and put it in the crate, and add nothing to your face and go back inside. 2 things break the ordinary time before the roundup gathers. The first is the missing cattle. Amos reads it out of the ground on a Tuesday, on the far northeast line, the 2 of you riding the breaks where the caprock crumbles down toward the river country. He pulls up at a crossing where cattle trail down to water, and sits and looks, and you have learned enough by now to look too, though you don't yet see what he sees. Tracks. A bunch of cattle, maybe 30, moving north, which cattle in April with green grass coming have no earthly reason to do, and moving straight, which cattle never do at all. Grazing cattle wander like handwriting. Driven cattle move like a sentence somebody meant. Shod horses, Amos says, and points his chin at 2 crisp tracks among the cloven ones. Both sides of the bunch. Day and a half old. Rustlers. The word arrives in your stomach before it arrives in your head. This is the crime of the country. Not banks, not trains. Those newspaper crimes. The crime here is 30 head eased quietly off the edge of a range too big to watch, driven north into the breaks, brands worked over with a running iron, heated in a greasewood fire, a T made into a barbed cross, an L closed into a box and sold to a buyer 200 miles away who is professionally incurious. And you know, everyone knows what the range does about it when the range catches it. Because there is no sheriff. The county isn't even organized yet. The courthouse in Tascosa stands empty, and the law here is a rope and a tree and the profound problem that this country doesn't have trees. Amos looks up the tracks a long moment. Then he does the thing that teaches you more about this world than the tracks did. He takes out a tally book and a pencil stub, writes the count, the place, the direction, and the date, and puts it away, and turns his horse for home. We ain't the law, he says, feeling your question without looking at it. And 2 men following 4 into the breaks is arithmetic, not justice. Castle send word to the association. He rides a while. Association's got men for this now, hard men. It gets settled. Another while. You don't want the details, and I ain't got 'em, and that's how everybody prefers it. And that's the whole episode. No chase, no shots, a pencil stub. And it hangs over the bunkhouse for 2 days anyway. A low barometric unease, because 30 stolen head means someone was on your range, in the dark, working quiet, maybe watching the line camps, maybe watching you, and the plains, which have begun to feel like a room you lived in, remind you that they are a room anyone can enter from any of 400 directions. The second thing is the Bronx. The ranch takes on a string of new horses in late April. 4-year-olds, range raised, halter broken, nothing more, 16 head of muscle and opinion. And they have to become working saddle horses before the roundup. and the man who does this is a specialist, a contract bronc rider who drifts from outfit to outfit doing nothing else. And he arrives on a Sunday that isn't with his own saddle and a face like a closed fist, and his name is Pruitt, and he is 26 years old and walks like he's 51, and that walk is the entire job description. Bronc riding, the real kind, is not the rodeo you'll see a century later, 8 seconds and a buzzer. It's a trade, done in a dust-fogged corral at $5 a head, and it goes on all day, and everyone finds reasons to work near the corral because it is the best show on 400,000 acres. Pruitt forefoots the colt with a rope, lays it down gentle as bedding a child, sacks it out, a saddle blanket flapped over every inch of it until the terror runs out of the hide, then the hackamore, then the saddle, then the moment, the colt back on its feet, humped like a cat. Pruitt stepping up with a motion so smooth it looks lazy. And then the world's original argument, animal versus intention, dust standing in the air like smoke, the colt doing everything its body was built to do, and Pruitt sitting through all of it loose as a rag. And when it ends, it always ends the same way, with the colt standing spraddled and blowing, ears making their first honest inquiry. Pruitt pets its neck and talks to it low, because the whole point, he says, the only point, is that the horse's last memory of the day is kindness. He gets hurt on the 11th horse. Everyone gets hurt on some horse. It's not drama, it's the trade's tax. The colt throws itself over backward, the one thing you can't ride through, and Pruitt gets clear of the horn by a handspan and comes up out of the dust with his left wrist, bent in a direction wrists don't offer. He looks at it. The corral is silent. He walks to the fence, has Bertram pull it straight. You hear that from 30 feet, a sound like a green branch, and Pruitt makes no sound at all, just goes a colour, splints it with a cedar slat and a saddle string, and rides 2 more colts that afternoon with one hand, because he contracted 16 head, and out here a man's word and his wrist are not the same category of thing, and only one of them is allowed to break. You watch all of it from the fence with your forearms on the top rail, and Tally beside you watching the same way, and you understand you are looking at your own possible futures, all of them at once, the skill, the wage, the walk, the wrist. 30 a month, $5 a horse, the country don't care. That night in the bunkhouse, Pruitt plays cards left-handed and loses cheerfully, and Dodge tells the one about the frozen candle flame for the new man's benefit, and the stove ticks, and outside the 16 colts stand in the dark corral, each one carrying its new first memory of kindness, and you sleep the sleep of a man whose body has begun, at last, to fit its work. The days repeat until they blur, and then, in the 3rd week of April, the blur ends, because the roundup begins, and everything before it turns out to have been rehearsal. Understand the problem the roundup exists to solve. There are no fences. All winter, the cattle of 6 ranches have drifted and mixed across a country the size of a small European nation. Nobody knows exactly what he owns. Every calf born since fall is running unmarked at its mother's side, and an unmarked calf belongs, by the custom of the range, to whoever's cow it follows, which means every calf must be gathered, matched to its mother, and burned with its owner's brand before it weans, because a weaned, unbranded animal, a maverick, belongs to nobody, which is to say, to the first man with a rope and flexible ethics. So every spring, the ranches of a district pool their men and work the whole country together, sweep by sweep like a search party the size of an army. Outfits send their wagons and their riders to an agreed starting point. For 6 weeks you will live out of a chuck wagon, sleep on the ground and work cattle from dark to dark. The bunkhouse, which 3 weeks ago felt like a crowded box, will start to seem, in memory, from a wet bedroll, like a palace you were fool enough to complain about. The gather works like this. Before dawn, the riders fan out from camp in a great circle, 10-15 miles across, and then sweep inward, pushing every animal ahead of them toward a chosen flat. By mid-morning the drives converge, and where there was empty grass there is suddenly a herd, 2,000, 3,000 head, bawling, milling, raising a column of dust you can see from the next county, a brown organism the size of a town, with riders stitched around its edges holding it together by pure horsemanship. And then the cutting starts, and the cutting is the most beautiful work you will ever watch. A cutter rides into the herd on a specialized horse, and the cutting horse is the aristocrat of the Remuda, worth 3 ordinary mounts, and Marsh Wheeler is riding the best one on this range. And he drifts through the cattle slow as smoke, no sudden moves, until he finds a cow wearing a neighbour's brand, or a cow with an unmarked calf glued to her flank. And then the horse takes over. That's the part you can't believe until you see it. The man almost stops riding. He shows the horse the cow, and the horse does the rest. Head low, snaking, feinting, mirroring the cow's every dodge a half beat, before she makes it, walking her out of the herd against her whole will, and the cow is furious and the horse is calm, and Marsh sits up there with the reins slack, rolling a cigarette with both hands at a full working trot, which is the ranger's way of saying what a man doesn't say out loud. This horse is so good I'm only here as a passenger. You're not cutting. You'll not cut for years, if ever. You're holding herd, sitting your horse at the edge of the mass for hours, turning back the ones that test the edge. And you are flanking calves at the branding fire, which is the bottom rung of the ladder, and the bottom rung is where the work is. Here is the branding fire, and I want to give it to you whole, because it is the industrial heart of this entire world. The fire itself is mesquite roots, burning down to a bed of coals, with 6 or 8 branding irons buried in it, their stamped ends going from black to red to the grey of ash-hot iron. The smell reaches you before anything. Wood smoke first, then the green stink of burned hair, then, underneath, the smell you'll carry in your clothes for 6 weeks, scorched hide, which smells like nothing else on earth, somewhere between a struck match and a slaughterhouse, and by the 2nd day you don't smell it anymore, and by the 6th week the whole crew smells of it together, one collective animal reek moving across the plains. The ropers work out of the herd. Refugio comes dragging a calf at the end of his line. He ropes them by the hind heels, which is harder and kinder both, the calf sliding along on its side rather than being jerked by the neck, and he brings it to the fire at a walk and calls the brand he read on the mother. The calf's whole legal identity sung out over the noise, and then it's you. You're a flanker. You and a boy from the neighbouring outfit's crew step in, and you take the rope side, and there is a technique. Hand over the flank, knee against the body, lift and let the calf throw itself. And when it's done right, the calf is on its side in one motion, and when it's done wrong, which is how you do it the first dozen times, the calf kicks free, and you take a split hoof across the shin bone, and the men at the fire observe your education without pausing in their work. Down, the calf is a machine of panic. You hold the top foreleg bent back and put your knee on its neck. Your partner sits behind it with one boot, pushing the bottom hind leg forward and both hands hauling the top one back. And now the calf is stretched and pinned and screaming. They scream. Nobody had told you they scream. A raw human-adjacent ball 3 inches from your ear. Every one of them. 400 times a day. And the work happens fast because fast is mercy. The Iron Man steps in with the stamp iron glowing grey-orange and sets it to the hip. 1 firm rock of the wrist, 1.5 seconds. No more. Press too long and you burn through to raw flesh and make a wound. Too light and the brand hairs over by fall and might as well not exist. And the smoke comes up off the hide in a white curl that goes straight into your face. Hair stink and hide stink and your eyes water. And the calf convulses under your knee with the strength that has nothing to do with its size. Another man is at its head with a knife making the earmarks. Every ranch has its registered pattern of crops and swallow forks, because you can read an earmark at a distance when a brand is hidden by the animal's angle. If the calf is a bull calf, it stops being one. Right there, 2 strokes of the knife man's blade, and Bertram will collect that harvest in a bucket, and tonight the crew will eat what the crew delicately calls calf fries, and they are delicious, and you will be too hungry to be squeamish. And this is perhaps the fastest falling of all your civilized standards. Then everyone steps back at once. The calf lies still for a heartbeat, insulted by the entire world, then scrambles up and runs bawling for its mother, wearing its brand, and the mother finds it, and the 2 of them shoulder into the herd, and Refugio is already coming with the next one. 400 head, some days 500, between sun-up and dark. Do the flankers' arithmetic, the only arithmetic this life will ever ask of you. 400 calves, and you wrestle down half of them, and the average is maybe 150 pounds of fighting animal each time, and that is 15 tons of panicking livestock through your arms and knees in a day. By noon your forearms don't fully close. By dark your hands have curled into hooks that you soak open around a coffee cup. There is a specific pain in the webbing of your thumbs that has no name, and manure ground into your knees, and a hoof-shaped bruise coming up green on your thigh, and burn freckles on your wrists where sparks off the irons landed, and you fall asleep at supper, sitting up with a fork in your hand, and someone takes the plate out of your lap so you don't spill it, and no one mocks you for it, because every man in this camp fell asleep sitting up in his own first roundup, and there are certain humiliations the range doesn't charge for. But here's what else is happening so quietly you almost miss it. On the 4th day, when the boy flanking with you gets careless and a big calf's hind hoof comes at his face, your hand is already there, catching the hock out of the air before your mind has voted on it. Nobody cheers. But Marsh, walking past with an iron, says, and the Iron Man starts calling you by your name instead of calling you boy. And that evening at the wagon, when you reach for the coffee, Dodge hands you the pot handle first instead of letting you burn yourself on it, which is, by the emotional currency of this place, roughly a bear hug. And on the 9th day, Amos Trueblood rides in from the cut with a cow fighting his rope, looks around the fire and says, "Eli, take her head." Your name, a job with risk in it, in front of 3 outfits men. You take her head. Camp life during the roundup deserves a page of its own, because camp is where you learn that the chuck wagon is not a vehicle, it is a capital city. Bertram's wagon anchors everything. The chuck box on its tailgate folds down into a work table, and behind that door is a filing system of drawers and cubbies as exact as a bank's. Flour, coffee, salt, Sourdough crock, the medicine drawer with its quinine and horse liniment, which is also people liniment. Nobody pretends otherwise. The fire pit sits a measured distance downwind. Bedrolls unroll where Bertram's geography permits, and there are laws in this small nation, and the laws are absolute. No man rides his horse into camp raising dust near the food, on pain of Bertram. No man ties a horse to the wagon wheel, on pain of Bertram. Any man who takes the last of the coffee without starting more will wish, in this life, that he had not. And the pot rides in its place, and the Dutch ovens are touched by one man on this earth, and you are not that man. The sourdough crock is the outfit's true treasure, and this is not sentiment, it's chemistry. Bertram's starter is 11 years old. It has crossed the Red River more times than most of the men. On cold nights he takes it into his own bedroll like a baby, because if the starter dies, the biscuits die, and the biscuits are 2 of the 3 foods, and an outfit can absorb the loss of any rider with more grace than the loss of the crock. You watch a 60-year-old man tuck a stoneware jar tenderly under his blankets, and nobody smiles, and you don't either. And the rain. I've given you the lightning and the fire, but ordinary rain is its own quiet enemy at round-up. There are no tents. A cowboy's shelter is his slicker and his tarp. The bed tarp folds over the bedroll like an envelope. And when it rains at night, you lie in your envelope listening to it drum, dry so long as you touch nothing, because canvas sheds water only until pressure touches the inside of it, and every green hand learns this the identical way, by drawing up his knees in his sleep and waking to 2 round, cold-soaked patches where his knees printed the tarp, and lying there till 4 in the morning in the wet and never doing it again. It rains 3 nights running in the 2nd week, and the crew turns out each dawn steaming like the cattle, rings out, drinks coffee that tastes of ashen metal and heaven, and works 14 hours, and does it again. And the astonishing thing, the thing you could not have believed in March, is that nobody is sick, nobody quits, and by the 3rd wet morning the misery has curdled all the way over into comedy, men calling their bedrolls their bathtubs, Dodge inquiring loudly whether Bertram might serve the water separate from the food for once, and you begin to understand that cheerfulness, out here, is not a temperament, it is discipline. It is the 8th or 9th tool on the belt, kept as deliberately as the rope, because 12 wet men who let themselves go sour become dangerous to each other, and everyone knows a story about an outfit that curdled, and no one wants to be a story. You sleep those weeks, a sleep you will chase for the rest of your life and rarely catch again. The sleep of the utterly spent body on the actual ground, Mother Earth for a mattress and your saddle for a pillow, wool and canvas and the fire smell, the horse herd grazing in the dark with a sound like slow rain, and the night guard's song threading through all of it, so that even your dreams keep one ear on the herd. Now I have to tell you about the nights, because the nights are where this story has been heading all along. During roundup, the day's gathered cattle can't be turned loose. The whole point was collecting them. So every night the herd is held on open ground and held by men. Night guard. The crew stands it in shifts, 2 hours and a half at a time, 2 to 4 riders circling a sleeping herd of 2,000 or 3,000 animals, and the shifts have names like the hours of a monastery. First guard at dusk, then the middle watches, then the graveyard shift that gives its name to every graveyard shift you've ever worked, and last guard, which ends when Bertram's fire shows. You draw the middle watch, midnight to 2:30, and the first night of it changes something in you permanently. Because here is a thing you did not know about cattle. At night, bedded down, a herd breathes. You ride the circle slow. Everything's slow. Everything's smooth. A night herd is a held explosion, and every man riding it knows this, and from the dark mass beside you comes this vast layered sound. Thousands of animals sighing and chewing their cud and groaning as they shift their weight. A sound like surf, like a giant sleeping in the next room. The night is enormous. The stars come down to the grass on every side, no mountain, no tree, no light of any human town to stop them, and the Milky Way stands overhead so dense and close it looks like weather. Your horse walks the circle by himself. He knows the work better than you do. And across the herd, invisible, the other rider on your watch is circling the opposite way, and you pass each other twice around, a shape and a creak of leather, and neither of you speaks, because you do not speak loudly around a night herd. You sing to it instead. This is not a legend. This is procedure. A sleeping herd startles at sudden sounds, a snapped stick, a sneeze, a horse shaking itself, but a continuous sound smooths all the small sounds over, wraps the night in a known noise, and so every night rider sings, endlessly, quietly, whatever he knows. Hymns mostly, because hymns are what men have all the verses to. Sad songs, because the slow ones work best. Across the herd you can hear Santos, on the far side of 3,000 cattle, singing in Spanish, something old, something with 100 verses, his voice arriving at you around the edges of the herd like light around a planet, and you, 19, raw-handed, mud-stained, and nobody from Grayson County, you clear your throat and you sing to the darkness the only things you're sure of, your mother's church songs, to an audience of cattle under the entire sky. And the herd listens. That's the fact of it. The herd breathes and listens and sleeps. I'd like to leave you there, but this is 1880, and the men riding those circles are not singing for the beauty of it. They are singing because they are afraid, every one of them, of one specific thing, and I have to tell you what it is because in 3 weeks it is going to happen to you. The word is stampede, and you have heard the word your whole life, and it has therefore lost its meaning, so let me give the meaning back. A herd of longhorns is a standing wave of nerves. These are half-wild animals, many of them never handled before this month, and at night their fear sits just under the skin of the whole mass. Almost anything can strike the spark. A coyote's yip, a rider's match, a tumbleweed, a horse stumbling, one cow stepping on another's horn, and when the spark strikes, there is no swelling panic, no gathering murmur. Men who live through many of them all report the same impossible detail. A sleeping herd, 3,000 animals lying down, gets to its feet and reaches full speed as one body in a single second, like a struck drum. 1 second. The sound is the first thing. A sound men spent the rest of their lives trying to describe and always reached for the same words. Thunder, but thunder that doesn't stop. Thunder out of the ground instead of the sky. A roar you feel in your chest and your horse feels in his legs. And the ground itself trembling so that cups rattle on the wagon a mile away. And then 3,000 cattle are running blind in the dark at 25 miles an hour with their horns down, and they will run over anything. Bank, bog, wire, wagon, man. And the only thing between them and the horizon is a handful of riders. And the job of those riders, the actual written nowhere job description, is to spur their horses to the front of that, in the dark, over ground they cannot see, and turn the leaders. You can't stop a stampede. Nothing stops it. What you can do is bend it. Get a rider up alongside the lead animals and press them. Crowd them. fire a pistol beside their heads if it comes to that, and force the front of the herd to curve and keep pressing until the herd is running in a circle, chasing its own tail, what the hands call putting them in a mill, and a milling herd winds itself tighter and tighter until it has to stop, blowing and rolling its eyes, having gone nowhere. That's the theory. The practice is a man on a galloping horse. At night, sometimes in rain so hard he cannot see the horse's ears, riding full out across prairie dog towns and dry washes beside a river of horns. The horse steps in one hole, and the man goes down under the herd, and cattle do not go around. Every crew has its stories. Every man who rode the open range for 10 years carried a list of names. On the trail drives north there were riders buried where they fell in blankets. No coffin to be had within 200 miles, and the crew sang something over the grave and moved the herd out the same morning, because 3,000 cattle do not wait on grief. Ask any old hand what killed cowboys, and he will not say gunfights. The gunfights mostly happened in the newspapers. He will say horses falling, rivers, lightning, and stampedes at night, the plain procedural dangers, the weather and the work, and it's the lightning you learn to watch for, because lightning is the great cause, the one that combines all the others. A plains thunderstorm at night puts every terror in one box. The herd is already up and nervous. The thunder covers every warning sound. The rain blinds the riders. The ground turns greasy. And the men who worked these herds swore to a thing that sounds like folklore, and has been sworn to by too many sober witnesses to dismiss, that in the charged air before a strike fire crawls on the herd itself. Pale blue flames standing on the tips of 10,000 horns, running along the horse's ears, bawling on a man's hat brim. St. Elmo's fire, science calls it. The hands called it foxfire, and when you see it, when the whole dark herd lights up faintly blue like something out of scripture, you're already too late to do anything but be in the saddle. You learn all this the way you learn everything here, in fragments at the fire, from men who mention their catastrophes the way farmers mention rain. Dodge, it turns out, was in the great run on the Cimarron in '76 that scattered a herd over 40 miles. Marsh once milled a herd almost alone and doesn't tell that story. Amos tells it for him, 5 sentences, while Marsh looks at the fire, and Amos himself. Amos was on the Red River in '71, the year the lightning storms came one after another for a week, and he will say only this about it. We buried 2 boys in one blanket because we couldn't tell whose was whose. He says it and spits, and gets up to check his horse, and the fire pops, and 16-year-old Tally, the wrangler, sits there with his eyes big, and you realize you and he have the same face on. May comes in hot. The roundup works its way east, sweep by sweep, 10,000 calves branded across the district, and the crews thin as the neighbour outfits peel off toward their own ranges. The grass turns from grey to green underneath itself, and the playa lakes fill, and the bogging season ends, and you are a different animal than you were in March, 11 pounds heavier, and all of it in your shoulders and forearms, your hands finished turning into your father's hands, your seat in the saddle gone quiet so that preacher, who tests you now only on the coldest mornings and only as a formality, has become, though neither of you would admit to the word, yours. And in the last week of May, the air changes. You feel it before you understand it. 3 days of heat with a wet edge to it. Unusual for this country. The wind swinging around to the southeast and coming in heavy, sticky Gulf air hauled 600 miles inland. The horses feel it. The whole remuda is cranky, stamping, swishing at flies that aren't there. The cattle feel it. The day herd won't settle at noon, won't graze in one direction. Bertram feels it in his ruined hip and says so at length to his Dutch ovens. And on the third evening, Amos stands away from the fire for a long time looking at the southwest horizon, where the sunset is going down into a bank of cloud the colour of a bruise, with a hard white anvil top climbing out of it into the last light, so high it looks like a landform, like God's own mesa, and lightning already working inside it. Silent at this distance, the light of it pulsing in the cloud like something swallowing. Cass comes and stands beside him. The two of them look at it. "Double the guard," Cass says. "Nobody sleeps in his boots off. Tally, keep the night horses in close." He turns and looks at the camp, at all of you, and his eyes stop on you for a moment. The new man, the boy in the dead boy's job, and whatever he thinks. What he says is what he always says. 9 words or fewer. And these are the 9. "Big herd. Bad night coming. Everybody rides tonight, everybody." The herd that night is 2,800 head, gathered for the last big sweep, bedded on the best ground available, a wide flat with a shallow rise to the north, and everything that can be done right has been done right. Doubled guard, night horses saddled and staked at hand, the picked ones, the sure-footed ones. The wagon's fires drowned early. Every man rolled into his blankets, dressed, boots on, hat under the blanket edge to keep it findable, the way you sleep when you expect to be up. You have the middle watch again, you and Santos and 2 more. You want to know what the middle of a bad night feels like from the inside, and I'll tell you, because you're about to live a long time inside a few hours. 10 o'clock, the storm still 50 miles off, but the lightning is continuous now, the whole southwestern sky flickering like a lamp with a bad wick, and by that flicker you can see the herd, and the herd is wrong. They should be bedded. 2/3 of them are standing. Heads up, all facing the storm, 2,800 animals pointed the same direction like iron filings, and the sound coming off them is not the surf breathing of a sleeping herd, but a low, continuous, unsettled rumble of bawling. Cows calling calves in close. The whole mass packing itself tighter than it should. 11 o'clock. The wind dies. Entirely. This is the worst sign there is, and every man riding the circle knows it. The still held breath air that the planes produce right before they produce everything else at once. The night goes hot and close as a barn. Your shirt sticks to you. And in that stillness, riding your slow circle, you notice your horse's ears, and along the fine hairs of them there is a faint, pale, impossible light. You look at the herd, and the herd is burning blue. It's exactly what they told you, and nothing like what you imagined. A dim phosphorescence standing on the horn tips, thousands of paired blue points floating over the dark mass of bodies, swaying as the animals sway, and balls of it, the size of oranges, drifting on the tallest horns and dripping and reforming. Foxfire! The air itself is charged so full it's leaking. There's a smell, sharp, metallic, like a struck flint, like the air after a close strike, and your scalp is crawling under your hat, and it is not fear, or not only fear. It is the actual electricity standing your hair up. Santos passes you on the circle. He doesn't stop singing. He has not stopped singing for an hour, and he will not stop. And his voice is the one steady human thing on the flat, and you understand suddenly, completely, what the singing is for. Not for the cattle. For everyone. Midnight, or near it. The storm arrives not gradually, but like a door opening. The temperature drops 20 degrees in a minute. The dead air turns and comes howling out of the northwest with the cold front behind it, and the first rain crosses the flat in a moving wall you can hear approaching, hissing on the grass, and then it's on you. And it is not rain in any way you've used the word. It is water in the air the way there is water in a river. Your hat brim collapses. You cannot see your horse's ears. The lightning is everywhere now and constant. The thunder no longer following the flashes but continuous with them, overlapping, and in the strobe white bursts the herd appears and disappears. Up, all of them up now, packed, screaming that blue fire crawling. And then a single strike comes down close. Not on the herd. On the rise, north, close enough that light and sound arrive together as one physical blow, close enough that you smell it, and the whole world goes white-purple, and in that white-purple instant you see the herd already moving, not starting to move, moving, as one animal, the struck drum. The sound reaches you a half-second later, and it is exactly what they said, and worse. The ground itself roaring, a bass note below hearing that comes up through your horse's legs and your own bones, 2,800 head at a dead run in the dark, and they are coming your way, and every lesson you've been given in 3 months compresses itself into a single instruction. The one Amos gave you at a branding fire weeks ago with no emphasis at all, as if mentioning the weather. When they run, you run with them. Never across, never stand. Ride the edge, get forward, and turn them. Your horse is already running. You didn't ask him to. He is a night horse. This is his profession. He knew before you did, and he has made the only survivable choice, which is to run at the angle of the herd's edge, alongside the flood, and now your entire job is to not fall off and to help him see, except neither of you can see, and this is the part no story had prepared you for. You're galloping absolutely blind. Full speed, over ground pocked with dog holes and cut with washes, in blackness, in water, beside a river of horns 12 feet to your right, and the only light in the universe is the lightning, which comes every few seconds and gives you the world in frozen photographs. Herd, grass, rain, darkness. Herd, wash coming, jump, darkness. And your horse jumps the wash by memory and lands running, and you're making sounds into the roar that you will never remember making. You ride forward along the flood. That's the work. Whatever is behind cannot be helped. Everything is decided at the front. Minutes of this. You'll never know how many. Men never do. And a lightning frame shows you another rider ahead and to your right. In against the leaders, so close his stirrup must be brushing them. A big man riding like he was poured into the horse. Marsh. Marsh is at the point already, pressing the lead cattle, crowding them leftward, and another frame shows a second rider coming up beyond him, the flat build of Cass. And now you understand your own place in the shape. You are third, you're the pressure behind their pressure, and you put your horse in against the flank of the flood, close enough that a horn tip once touches your knee like a tap on the shoulder from something that weighs 1,000 pounds, and you push. The herd bends. You feel it before any flash confirms it. The pressure changing, the flood curving away under Marsh's crowding, the leaders swinging left, and the miracle mechanics of it taking hold. Cattle behind following the cattle in front, the head of the snake starting to seek its own tail. Somebody is firing a pistol up front. These shots tiny snaps inside the general roar, punctuation to bend the leaders harder. The circle closes. The herd comes around into itself, and the roar begins, not to die, but to change pitch, tightening, the mill winding up like water going down a drain. and men are on all sides of it now, appearing in the flashes, riding the rim of a spinning wheel of cattle a quarter-mile across, and the rain is slacking from impossible to merely torrential, and it is going to hold. You can feel it hold. The run is caught, and that is the exact moment. The moment the fear lets go of your chest and lets you breathe. That you hear, behind you, in a lull between thunders, a sound from the darkness out on the flat where the herd has just passed. A horse screaming, not a man, a horse. But where there is a downed horse screaming, there is a rider, and every man who hears it feels the same cold drop through his stomach, and 3 of you peel off the mill and ride toward the sound, striking matches that the rain kills, shouting a name into the dark before you even know whose name to shout, and the lightning, obliging for once, shows you the scene in one white instant that you will carry to your grave. A dog hole! A horse down with its foreleg wrong, thrashing. And 10 feet beyond it, where he was thrown clear of the horse but not of the herd, a shape in the grass that is not moving at all. It's Santos. The herd went over him. You can see the ground itself, the whole width of the flood's path printed into the mud, thousands of tracks overlapping like a language, and the shape in the grass lies inside that written path. Refugio is off his horse before it stops sliding. He is on his knees in the mud, and he has his brother's head in his hands, and he is talking to him in Spanish, low and fast and constant, the way you talk to a spooked animal, the way Santos talked to the herd, and the rain comes down on all of it, and the rest of you stand back in a half circle with your hats coming off, and nobody sends for the doctor, because the doctor is 90 miles away, and everyone standing in that rain has already read the ground, and the ground says what it says. But then the shape moves. A hand comes up out the mud, the left hand slow, shaking like an old man's, and it takes hold of Refugio's sleeve. And the flat goes so quiet inside all that thunder that you can hear Santos say in English for the benefit of the whole crew, in a voice like gravel dragging, "The horse. Somebody see. To the horse. He is alive. He is broken. The collarbone, ribs, the left arm in 2 places, his face a mask of mud and blood, one boot torn clean off and that leg swelling already." But the herd, running blind, did what running herds sometimes inexplicably do around a downed man in a hole's shallow depression. The mass split, some fraction of it. Enough of it. What went over him was the edge, not the river. He will not ride for 2 months. He will limp forever, and his left hand will ache before every storm for the rest of his life, and he will sing to herds again by August. Dodge sees to the horse. 1 shot, flat in the rain. Nobody speaks about it. It is the only mercy on the menu, and out here you learn to call it mercy without flinching, and you don't flinch, and you notice that you don't, and you understand that Grayson County is a long way behind you now. They carry Santos to the wagon on a stretcher made of 2 lariats and a slicker. Bertram, who has splintered more men than most doctors, works on him by lantern light until 3 in the morning, cursing gently and continuously, like a man praying in reverse. The mill winds down. The rain stops an hour before dawn, all at once the way it came, and the sky in the east goes the colour of a peeled peach over 2,800 cattle, standing exhausted and steaming in the first light, exactly where the men held them, having gone, all told, nowhere. Cass rides the circle once at sun-up, counting. Then he rides to the wagon, looks at Santos, splintered, grey-faced, awake, for a long moment and says, "Held them all," which is not a report. It is the highest sentence he knows how to pay, and Santos, whose crushed ribs won't let him laugh, smiles instead and closes his eyes. You drink Bertram's coffee standing in the wet grass with your hands shaking around the cup. Now, only now, hours late, the shaking arriving like a bill, and Amos comes and stands next to you, facing the herd, and drinks his own, and says nothing for a long time. Then, you row to the front. Yes, sir. In the dark. Your first run. The horse mostly did it. Amos considers this. Somewhere behind you, men are already relaying the night story to each other in the flat, spare, understating dialect that the range tells all its stories in, and your name is in it. Horse can't do it alone, Amos says. He empties his cup, flicks the grounds. You'll do. And he walks off, bow-legged, old, indestructible, and that, you'll do, is the whole ceremony. There is no other ceremony. But when the crew mounts up that morning, dead tired, to move the herd to fresh grass, Marsh Wheeler reins in beside you, looks you over once, and hands you something without a word. Santos's night guard song is what it mounts to, the middle watch, the trusted watch, permanently yours now, though what he actually hands you is a dry match from inside his hatband, because yours are all wet, and out here that is the same thing. And then, in the second week of August, in the deep of the dry, comes the afternoon you smell smoke. You need to understand what August has done to this country first. 6 weeks without rain. The green of June is a memory. The grass has cured on the stem into something the colour of a lion, and it crackles when you ride through it. And it is, from horizon to horizon, in every direction, without one single break of ploughed ground or river or road, fuel. 1,000,000 acres of standing tinder, and a wind across it every day at 20 miles an hour, and every man on the ranch has spent the whole month watching the horizons without discussing it, the way men in a powder magazine don't discuss matches. Lightning starts, most of them. Dry storms. Thunderheads that walk across the plains, all flash and no rain, striking at the grass like a snake. Sometimes it's a campfire not drowned dead, or a hunter's carelessness, or the sun through a broken bottle. It doesn't matter. What matters is the column. You see it first, you, because you're on the far west swing that afternoon. A grey-white pillar standing on the southwest horizon, where no pillar should be, leaning with the wind, and its base is too wide, and it is growing while you look at it, and something old in your spine knows before your head finishes the sentence. You turn preacher, and you ride for headquarters as fast as you have ever ridden anywhere, and you can already do the terrible arithmetic of it. The wind southwest at 20, the fire southwest of everything, of the herd on the summer range, of the hay meadow, of headquarters itself, and a head fire in cured grass with a wind behind it moves faster than a horse can run. That is not a figure of speech. Faster than a horse can run. Men have been overtaken and killed on good horses, and the cattle, which cannot be explained to, will run ahead of it until it eats them. By the time you slide into headquarters, Cass has seen the smoke himself, and the whole machinery of the outfit's response is already turning, and it turns around one brutal tool, and I want to tell you what it is, because it is the most cowboy solution to anything you will ever hear. You fight a prairie fire with a dead steer. There is no water. The fire is miles wide, and the barrels hold gallons. There are no ploughs nearer than the meadow, and no time, so the crew does what the range worked out through hard years. Cass points at the day herd's edge, and Marsh ropes a big steer, and Dodge heels it, and it is shot and split open lengthwise, and this is the tool. A rope is run from the horns to one rider's saddle horn and from a hind leg to another's, and the carcass, wet side down, becomes a drag. 2 riders straddling the line of flames at a lope, dragging half a ton of wet, dead weight directly along the fire's edge, smothering it, wiping it out of the grass like a great bloody eraser, while men on foot follow behind with wet gunny sacks and slickers, beating out what the drag misses. And that becomes your evening, and your night, and your dawn. You ride drag on the north flank paired with refugio, a rope from your horn to a steer's hind leg, and the work is like nothing you have words for. The heat comes off the fire line in a wall. Your side of your face cooks while the other side stays night cool. Your horse, and this is the thing you'll remember. This is the thing that will bring it all back 40 years later when you smell grass smoke. Your horse is afraid, deeply, correctly, ancestrally afraid, every cell of him voting to run, and he holds the line anyway because you ask him to, trembling and holding, and you talk to him the whole time the way Santos talks to herds, an unbroken rope of nonsense in a calm voice while your own heart bangs on your ribs. The smoke owns everything. It's not the campfire smell, it's rawer, greener, grass and sage together, and it fills your head until your thoughts taste of it. You breathe through your neck scarf and the scarf clogs with soot, and you breathe through it anyway. Ash comes down like warm grey snow, burning tumbleweeds. This is the fire's cruelest trick. Tear loose and go bounding downwind ahead of everything, each one a rolling torch seeding new fires a quarter-mile past your line, and riders have to break off and chase them, chasing literal rolling fire across the dark prairie, beating it out of existence with wet sacks. And if you'd described this job to yourself a year ago in Grayson County, you would have laughed. At full dark, the fire becomes beautiful, and you hate it for that. The line stretches across the black plain in a low orange script, miles of it, writing and rewriting itself, and above it the smoke glows underneath like a lid on hell, and the men working the line appear against it in silhouette, tiny, jerky, mortal. And once, in the worst hour, the wind lulls and swings a point or two north, and for 20 minutes nobody says a word because everyone is doing the same arithmetic about the hay meadow and the buildings, and then the wind swings back and Bertram, who has hauled the water barrels out on the wagon and is moving down the line with coffee in the middle of an inferno, because that is his understanding of his post, says to the night in general, "Well, not tonight," and that is the closest anyone comes to acknowledging what almost happened. The backfire finishes it. That's the last tool, the expert's tool, and it is Amos's, and watching him use it is like watching a man diffuse the world. Ahead of the main fire, off a stretch of old wagon trace barely 2 ruts wide, he lights the grass himself. Deliberately, a line of small fires from a twist of burning grass in his hand, and the little fires eat their way slowly back against the wind toward the big one, widening the bare ground so that when the head fire arrives at a gallop it finds its food already gone and dies at the trace like a wave on a beach. Fighting fire with fire. You will hear that phrase your whole life after tonight, in speeches, in sermons, from men in collars who never smelled it, and every single time for the rest of your days you will see a bow-legged old man walking calmly along 2-wheel ruts in the dark, sowing flames out of his fist. It's over by an hour past dawn. The burn is 8 miles by 3. You'll ride it out later with Cass, who counts everything. A black country, still smoking in its low places, floored with ash that puffs up around the horses' feet like the ghost of the grass, studded here and there with the carcasses the fire caught. A few head of cattle, blackened, grotesque, already drawing the buzzards down out of a sky that is otherwise as blue and satisfied as if nothing had happened. The rest of the herd stands bunched 2 miles east where the night riders held them, filthy and alive. Headquarters stands, the meadow stands. The crew rides home caked to the eyes. Soot, ash, sweat rilled through it all in stripes. Eyebrows singed off 2 men, everyone's voice burned down to a whisper, and there's a small blistered stripe on your right forearm where a flying ember sat for a second before you knew it, which Bertram greases without comment, and which will leave a thin, pale scar you'll carry into old age and touch sometimes without knowing you're doing it. Nobody says anything grand. Grand isn't the register. What's said is, Marsh, surveying the 12 of you at the corral, ruined and swaying, observes that the outfit could hire out as chimney sweeps and save the ranch our wages, and it isn't even a good joke, and it is somehow the funniest thing anyone has said all year, and 12 destroyed men stand in the morning sun laughing in whispers because their voices are gone. And then, this is the part I'd like you to keep, then everyone unsaddles and grains their horses and rubs them down long and carefully, longer than usual, every man on the place, because every man on the place spent the night asking his horse to stand next to fire, and the horses stood. Nobody organised this. Nobody said it. 12 men currying 12 horses in the smoky morning light, in silence, at the end of their strength, paying the only wage the horses can bank. Then breakfast. Then, because it is a working ranch, and the day's cattle don't know about the fire, then work. 3 weeks later, riding the west swing, you cross the burn again and pull up without meaning to, because the black is gone. Rain came behind the fire the way it sometimes mercifully does, and the whole 8-mile scar has come up in new grass. Not the tired late summer tan of everything around it, but a green so young and violent it looks lit from below, green like the word green, mile on mile of it, and the cattle have found it, of course. Dozens of them scattered across the old burn, grazing the sweet new growth off the ashes of the catastrophe, fattening on it. You sit your horse and look at it a long time. 19 going on 20, soot scar on your forearm, and the country showing you its whole hand at once. It will try to kill everything, and it will feed everything, and it will not distinguish between the two operations, and it will be throughout both. Beautiful past all fairness. The country don't care, so the men have to. You ride on. Summer settles over the plains like a lid. The roundup ends in mid-June. The neighbour wagons roll home and the ranch drops back into its ordinary rhythm, which after 6 weeks of branding fires and night runs feels almost like leisure, and is actually 70 hours a week of everything else. There is always everything else. Cattle to drift toward the summer range, screwworm cases to rope and doctor, and Amos was right. You smell the first one before you see it. That wrong sweetness riding the wind off a limping steer, and the doctoring is exactly as bad as his description, and you do it anyway. One-handed, holding your breath while the animal fights the rope, and you do it again the next day, and by July you can do it while thinking about something else, which is its own quiet milestone. There are wells to dig at the far water holes because the owner in his city has read about wells. There is hay to cut in the river meadow with mowing machines that break, and the break-in of machines is somehow also your job. There are horses to shoe, and the shoeing of a half-broke range horse is a rodeo held in a space the size of a kitchen, The heat is a fact you live inside. By 10 in the morning, the air over the flats begins to swim, and the horizon detaches and floats, and lakes of silver water appear in the distance and slide away as you ride at them. Mirage, every day, so routine that the hands navigate by it, and Dodge claims with a straight face that in the summer of 78 the mirage was so strong he watched an entire herd grazing upside down in the sky. It's 95, then 100, then 105, and the wind doesn't cool you, it drafts you like a bellows, and you learn tricks. Wet your hat crown at every waterhole, ride the draws in the afternoon, check your cinch twice, because sweat rots leather faster than rain. Your face and hands cure to the colour of a saddle. There's a white band across your forehead where the hat sits that will mark you as this kind of man for the rest of your life, in any clothes, in any city. Santos mends in the bunkhouse, his arm in Bertram's splints, promoted temporarily and disgustedly to cook's helper, peeling potatoes one-handed and being tyrannized by Bertram with obvious mutual affection. By August, as promised, he's riding again, day work only, easy circles, and the first night he takes back a guard shift. The whole crew somehow finds reasons to be awake and outside at midnight, not watching, just up, until his voice comes floating in off the flat, threading its old song round the herd, and then everyone goes to bed without comment. And in late July, wonder of wonders comes town. Cass calls it out at supper. The ranch needs a wagon load of supplies from Tascosa, and the trip takes 3 men, and one of them this time is you. 2 days' ride each way. Tascosa, the metropolis of the Panhandle, which is to say, 1 street, a dozen buildings, adobe and cottonwood logs, maybe 300 souls, a courthouse with no court in it yet, 2 stores, a blacksmith, and more saloons than all the other categories combined. It is the only town for 100 miles in most directions, and it exists to relieve cowboys of $30 a month, and it is extremely good at its job. I could tell you the wild stories about a trail town. Every book does. Here's what actually happens when you, Eli Dawson, hit town for the first time in 5 months. First, you get a haircut and a bath. A real bath, in a tin tub behind the barber shop, in water that 2 other men have not used first, for 2 bits. And the bath water, when you're done, is a colour you elect not to describe to anyone. Second, you eat a meal that is not beef, beans, and biscuits. It's eggs. Just eggs, fried, 6 of them, and canned peaches after, and you eat the peaches slowly, 1 slice at a time, with your eyes half closed, and the woman who runs the eating house watches a 19-year-old commune with canned fruit like it's a sacrament and refills your coffee without being asked. Third, you buy things. 2 shirts, socks, a wool coat against the winter everyone keeps mentioning in a particular tone, tobacco you don't really use but everyone buys, and, after standing in front of it for 10 full minutes, a hat. A good one. A $4 hat, 3 days' wages, and the moment it settles on your head, you understand every man who ever paid too much for one. And fourth, yes, the saloon, with Dodge and the 3rd man. And it's a low adobe room, blood-warm, loud, full of men from 6 ranches drinking their wages with terrifying efficiency, and a Monty game in the corner, and you drink 2 whiskies that taste like a barn fire and decline the 3rd, and Dodge, who never discusses Dodge City, gets exactly drunk enough to almost discuss Dodge City, stops himself, and buys the house around instead with money he cannot afford, because whatever happened there, this is apparently the anniversary of it. You spend in total $11 in one day, a third of a month gone by supper time, and you sleep in the wagon yard under the stars because a hotel bed costs 50 cents, and there are limits. And in the morning, loading flour sacks with a head that hates you, you understand the entire economic engine of the cattle kingdom from the inside. The money flows up from the grass, through the cow, through you, and straight across a plank bar, and the men who own the ranches stay rich, and the men who ride them stay $30 a month forever, and everyone involved would tell you it's freedom. And the strange thing, the thing you'd never admit east of the Red River, is that from inside a new $4 hat, it genuinely feels like it. It's on the ride home that you get your mountaintop. There are no mountains. But the wagon road home climbs out of the Canadian River, breaks up onto the Caprock, the great escarpment where the Llano Estacado lifts itself 200 feet above the rolling country below, a rampart of rust red and white stone running along the horizon like a wall built by something patient, and where the road tops out, Dodge, driving the wagon, pulls up the mules to breathe them, and you turn your horse around, and you look back the way you came, and there it all is. The brakes fall away below you, red and shadowed, folded like a rumpled blanket, the cottonwoods along the river showing as a green vein through it. The river itself catches the late sun in pieces, a broken silver string, and beyond it the plains run out, north, east, forever, grass to the world's edge, goes gold now at the end of July, with cloud shadows the size of counties sliding across it, and somewhere out in that impossible flatness, too far to see, is the ranch, the bunkhouse, 11 men, 100 horses, and scattered across 1,000,000 acres around them, the cattle, tiny and countless, the whole absurd enterprise of it, a handful of men holding an ocean of grass with ropes and singing. And here is the thought that finds you, sitting your horse on the Caprock rim with the wind pushing at your new hat. None of this will last. You don't know it the way we know it. You can't see the dates coming. The wire, the terrible winter of '86 that will kill the open range in a single season, the railroads, the fences, the end. But you can feel it, the way you can feel weather. The whole world you've been let into is a bonfire, not a hearth. It is burning gorgeously, and it is burning fast, and the men around you feel it too. It's why the old ones talk about the trail days the way other men talk about a first love. And standing on the rim, 5 months into it, 19 years old, you make the only vow available to a man with 8 cents an hour and no say in history. You will remember all of it. The blue fire on the horns, Santos's voice around the herd, the weight of the branding smoke, Amos saying you'll do. You will keep it, every pound of it, and carry it out of this century into whatever comes. Then Dodge says the mules are breathed, and you turn your horse, and the rim drops behind you. And the plane takes you back. August burns, September gentles. The fall works come, the beef roundup, smaller and sterner than the spring one, when the 4-year-old steers are gathered and shaped into a herd and pointed north, sold and shipped, the whole year's purpose funneling into a single column of 2,000 beeves walking toward the Dodge City rail pens with 6 riders around them. And you're not one of the 6. You're a first-year man. You stay and hold down the ranch, and you stand at the corrals watching the herd shrink northward into its own dust and feel, ridiculously like a boy watching the circus leave. Then October, and the first blue norther, and everything you thought you knew about cold gets revised. They tell you it's coming the way they told you about stampedes, flatly, over food. A norther isn't a storm, Marsh says. It's a border crossing. You'll see it. And you do see it. A low blue-black line lying on the northern horizon after 3 days of full spring warmth. A line that doesn't drift like cloud but advances like a wall, and the temperature when it crosses you doesn't fall, it snaps. 60 degrees to 25 in under an hour. The wind arrives like a thrown thing. Men caught out in shirt sleeves have died of it in October, an afternoon's ride from their own stove. Winter work is line camp work, and this is your last new world of the year. 2 men to a camp, and the camps are dugouts. Half-buried single rooms at the range's far corners, sod-roofed, dirt-floored, a stove, 2 bunks, a season's beans and flour and cartridges. And you draw the northeast camp, and you draw it with Amos, and the 2 of you live there, alone together, from November to February, riding the drift lines every day the weather allows. Because in winter the cattle drift. They can't help it. It's written in the animal. When the norther hits, a cow turns her tail to it and walks, and keeps walking south, sometimes for 50 miles, and every walking mile is weight lost and calves scattered and animals piled into draws and fence corners to freeze, and the winter rider's whole war is to be out in exactly the weather nothing should be out in, turning the drifters, breaking the ice on the water holes with an axe every single morning. Because a cow, and this fact will never stop offending you, will stand at a frozen pond and die of thirst rather than break 2 inches of ice with a hoof God specifically shaped for it. So you ride. In cold that makes the leather of your saddle creak like a ship, in cold that freezes the horse's breath into a lace of frost on his chest hairs, that grows icicles on his muzzle, that makes the snow squeak under his feet in a register you feel in your back teeth. You wrap your feet in gunny sacks over your boots. You thaw the bits over the stove each morning, because iron at 20 below will freeze to a horse's tongue and tear it. Your moustache, you have one now, it happened sometime in the fall without consulting you, carries ice by 10 a.m. And at night, the dugout, the stove roaring, beans going soft in the pot, the wind laying its whole body against the sod roof, and Amos Trueblood, 40 years of the range folded into him, finally talking. That's the treasure of the line camp, it turns out. The old man talks, not much, not fast, a story every night or 2, doled out like rations. But by February you've heard about the brush country of his boyhood, and the war years when the cattle went wild and multiplied in the thickets like fish, and the first drives north when nobody knew the way and the map was a river name and a star. You've heard about the Comanche horsemen he saw as a young man, the finest riders, he says flatly, that this or any country ever produced, and how the plains you ride were theirs alive and entire just 10 years ago. 10 years, less time than you've been able to whistle. Until the army and the buffalo hunters broke it all in a single decade, and the buffalo went from millions to memory so fast that the bones are still out there, whitening, and bone pickers gather them by the wagon load to sell for fertilizer at $8 a ton. You've ridden past those bone fields yourself, acres of skulls in the grass, and Amos speaks of all of it without varnish, the whole ledger, what was done and who it was done to, because the ranger's code against pretty lies runs deeper than its comfort. And one night, deep in January, with the wind screaming and the stovepipe glowing faint red at its collar, he tells you about the boy Whitfield, whose bunk you sleep in, who was his line camp partner in this same dugout last winter. He tells it in 4 sentences. Then he's quiet a while, and then he says the only soft thing you'll ever hear him say. Country don't care, Eli. That's the whole of it. It ain't cruel and it ain't kind. It just don't care. So the men have to. That's what the outfit's for. And the stove ticks, and the wind goes on, and you write that down inside yourself next to everything else you're keeping. You come down from the line camp in the last week of February, and the ranch headquarters, the cramped, reeking 12-man box you once counted the boards of, looks, riding in at dusk like a lit city. The bunkhouse takes you back without ceremony, which is how the bunkhouse does everything. Your bunk is your bunk. Your crate is where you left it. Tally has grown 2 inches and his voice has dropped. Dodge has a new scar and no story to go with it. Bertram pretends not to remember your name and then serves you a slab of dried apple pie that exists for no occasion anyone will name. Refugio grips your forearm once, hard, which is about Santos, and about the winter, and about nothing that will ever be put into words, and that's the end of it. And that first night back, lying in the warm rustle of the crowded room with 11 other breathings around you, you take inventory the way you now take inventory of everything. Hooves, ice, grass, sky, because that's what the year has built in you. A man who counts what's real. You came here 12 months ago with $11, soft hands and a borrowed saddle. Here is what you have now. You have $41 in a tobacco tin, which is what remains of 360 earned when the town, the hat, the winter coat and the boys' collections, for Santos's doctoring, for a Bronx stove rider on the neighbour outfit, for Whitfield's mother at Christmas. 'Cause the hat goes around this country, and no man ever asks what for, have all taken their share. You have your own saddle now, bought off a departing hand in the fall, and a bedroll that knows your shape. You have hands that can take a manila rope at a full run without feeling it, and a left thumb that will never entirely straighten, and a white scar on your shin with a hoof's own curve to it, and a back that speaks up in cold weather at 19, and will have a great deal more to say at 50. You have a horse that isn't yours on paper, and is yours in every way paper doesn't reach. Preacher, the man-hater, who last month stood dead still in a screaming norther for 2 hours while you pulled a heifer out of a drift, his body between you and the wind the whole time on purpose. You'd swear it in court on purpose. You have the middle watch. You have your name in the mouths of serious men. You have Amos Truebloods you'll do, which no promotion in any career you might have chosen instead would ever equal. And you have this room. 12 men in a box 16 feet by 24, who a year ago were strangers ranked above you and are now something there is no clean word for. Not friends exactly. Half of them you know almost nothing about. You don't know Dodge's real name. You never will. But you have held a rope while every one of them worked under it, and they have done the same beneath yours, and you have all been cold together and afraid together in the specific way this country makes men afraid, and there is a word the range uses for the whole arrangement. The men and the wagon and the brand and the shared unspoken everything, and the word is outfit. And you finally understand that it is one of the biggest words you know. Cass stops you by the corrals your third morning back. He looks at you the way he looked at you across a dark corral a year ago. 2 seconds, straight lines. Spring works next month, he says. Amos is getting old for the far circles. You'll ride his outside swing, a beat. 35 a month. $5. A rise of $5, and Amos's swing, and he's walking away before you finished hearing it, and that is the entire annual review, and you stand there in the March wind holding it, and it holds. The evenings, this last stretch of winter, are long and slow, and you've come to love them in a way you keep private. Supper done, dishes scoured with sand and rinsed. The crew settles into the lamp's yellow circle. Marsh reads a newspaper 6 weeks old. every word of it, advertisements included, and shares out loud anything worth sharing. Refugio braids rawhide, 8 strands, his fingers moving without being watched. Building a quirt so beautiful it belongs behind glass, and will instead be worn to pieces by weather. Somebody wins matchsticks off somebody. Somebody greases boots. Santos, whose left hand aches before storms now exactly as predicted, has learned to roll his cigarettes right-handed and claims they taste better. The stove ticks. The wind works the corners, and you sit on your bunk, the bunk that was Whitfield's and is now only yours, the way it will someday be only somebody else's, and you let the room happen around you, and you think the long, slow evening thoughts. You think about your mother in Grayson County and the letter you owe her, and how there is no way to put any of this in a letter. How do you write the blue fire on the horns? How do you write Amos's 4 sentences in the dugout? So you will write instead that you are well, that you eat plenty, that you've been made a swing rider, whatever she'll make of that, and that you wear your coat. All of it true, none of it the truth. The truth doesn't mail. You think about the ones the year took and almost took. The horse in the dog hole, Whitfield, whom you never met and half know, Santos's hand on Refugio's sleeve in the rain. The country don't care, so the men have to. You think, because on the Caprock Rim you promised to, about how this will all look from far away. And this is the strange, secret intimacy between you and me, between the boy in the bunk and everyone listening in the dark a century and a half downstream. You were right to make that promise. The world you're falling asleep in has 6 years left. The wire is already rolling west on flat cars. The winter that ends the open range is already forming, somewhere out in the future's weather. And afterward, the strangest fate of all, they will not forget you. They will remember you so hard, so gaudily, so wrongly. A man with your hat and your boots will become the most famous figure your country ever invents, on posters, in shows, in 100 years of flickering screens, and almost none of it will be you. None of it will be the ice axe at dawn, or the smell of the branding smoke, or 12 men and 1 stove, or 8 cents an hour, or the singing. The legend will keep everything but the life. So we came back tonight for the life. That was the whole errand. And now the errand's done, and the lamp is being turned down because Cass calls first light at 4. The room settles, man by man. The card game ends in a yawn and an insult. Boots hit the floor, 1 pair after another, 12 small thunders going quiet. Marsh folds his ancient newspaper along its worn creases like something being put away in a drawer of its own. The lamp goes out, and the darkness comes up warm out of the corners, stove-scented, leather-scented, entirely known. You pull the blankets to your chin. The hay-tick rustles once beneath you and goes still. Outside, the ranch keeps its own night watch without you. The horses in the corral shift and blow, easy, nose to tail against the cold. The windmill, new this year, the owner's latest idea, turns over slowly in the northwest breeze with a sound like a spoon in a cup, patient, mindless, drawing water in the dark for animals that will drink it at dawn. Far out on the flats, a coyote makes its remarks to another coyote, and the other coyote answers, and the distance between them is the size of the whole night, and the herd is out there. You can't hear it from here, but you know its sound now. You own that sound. The great sighing, the surf breath of 1,000 sleeping animals. And knowing it is enough. Somewhere a night rider is circling it right now, slow as the windmill, singing something with 100 verses. Your body begins its nightly surrender, joint by joint. The shoulders first, letting the day's ropes go. Then the small of the back, unclenching from the saddle it sat for 11 hours. Then the hands, the last to believe, always the hands, uncurling on the blanket, giving up their grip on nothing. The wind moves over the bunkhouse roof and finds nothing loose, and moves on. You're warm enough, fed enough, tired enough. Lord, tired enough. You have a bunk and a horse and a place in an outfit, and tomorrow will ask everything of you all over again, and tomorrow you will have it to give. But that's tomorrow. Tomorrow there will be ice to break and colts to gentle and the far circles to ride. Tomorrow there will be Bertram's coffee and Cass's 9 words and the whole enormous sky. Tomorrow, tomorrow. But that's tomorrow. Right now there is only the dark, and the stove ticking as it cools, and 11 other breathings slowing all around you into one shared rhythm, the whole room breathing now the way the herd breathes. One animal, warm in the middle of a country that doesn't care, cared for anyway. The sounds of the ranch grow fainter, or maybe you're just listening less. Let it come, now. Let sleep take you the way the dark takes the plains, all at once and gently, from every direction at the same time. Let the wind fade. Let the coyotes finish their conversation without you. Let your thoughts slow and soften and lose their edges and drift apart like cloud shadows sliding off the edge of the grass. Centuries will pass. The bunkhouse will fall and the wire will come, and the grass will be ploughed and will grow back and be ploughed again. The trails will become highways. The windmills will give way to machines no one in that room could dream, and the town of Tascosa itself will empty and go back to the grass almost entirely, and the plains will hold it all the way they hold everything, lightly, hugely, without comment. But people will still lie down tired at the end of long days, still ache in the hands from honest work, still listen to the wind at the corners of the roof and feel, in the last soft minute before sleep, that they are small and held at the same time. Some things don't change. The tired body doesn't change. The need for rest at the end of a long day, that doesn't change either. So let it come. You're 18 months from home and 8 cents an hour and 19 years old. And none of that matters now because the watch is somebody else's till dawn, and the herd is quiet and the outfit is all around you, breathing. You've earned this rest. Take it, and dream of grass to the edge of the world. Good night.